Welcome to In the Loop by Daloopa. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome, everybody. I'm Thomas, CEO of Daloopa, and today I have with me my partner and my friend Nick. Nick joins us from Anthropic. Nick, you want to introduce yourself?
Sounds good. Hey, folks. My name is Nick Lin, and I lead product for Claude for financial services, which is one of our first industry solutions at Anthropic. I am also a recovering investment banker and private equity investor, so a lot of the problems that we're about to talk about are really near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, so quick disclaimer, anything that's discussed today is not investment advice. This is for informational purposes only. And with that, let's get into it. So I think the big thing that obviously we want to talk about today is, Anthropic and Daloopa has come together to work on an integration, an MCP integration that, is part of Cloud for Financial Services. There are obviously other partners in this, but let's talk about, how we got started with that. And perhaps we can also talk about the future roadmap for what it is. So I'll provide my perspective on how they got started. I'd love to hear your perspective of how it got started. So I was introduced to someone at Anthropic through an investor. And what I was told is Anthropic was thinking about building out a vertical solution in finance. And they're looking for potentially partners to work together to build the solution. And at Daloopa, we've built this data set of essentially perfect historicals, right? We've gone through the work, we've built our own models, we train our own models to assemble this historical data set that covers, KPIs, operating data guidance and whatnot. And because the data set is cross-reviewed, is perfect, it theoretically cannot hallucinate. And when I remember I was introduced to you, I think this was in March probably or February or something like that. We basically said, hey, if there was a way for Claude to get access to your database, then we have this crazy moment where the output basically will have the data from Daloopa, which is verified to be true, with the chain of thought, the thinking, the intelligence of Claude. So you could create this output that no longer reflects, the workflow automation of helping you write an email or write better or summarize your notes. But now you can actually drive investment insight. You can do financial output. And I know we have more stuff that we're working on in the background. But that's my version of how it started, just seeing this vision that oh my God, my data can now be part of a research module where people can use it to write notes, to do research. That really got me super excited. That's my version. I'm curious to hear your version.
Yeah, for sure. I think, setting some context, Anthropic, and what gets me really excited about being at Anthropic is that we're enterprise focused at heart, right? Instead of really worrying about consumer viral moments, we spent a lot of time solving the hardest, the most complex problems where getting things wrong has real consequences, right? I think that's where financial services becomes really exciting to us and is a big hill that we want to climb on in partnership with industry insiders like yourselves. And that's really the only way for us to get a lot deeper into these workflows. And, as we thought about how do we go specifically into the enterprise, our philosophy is that the only way to win is to go much deeper into specific domains. And financial analysis and financial services is one of the core domains that we're obviously really excited about. And here, we started looking. We saw a lot of solutions on the market that's general purpose that everyone can adopt. And a lot of solutions on the market that are very good at specific vertical things, but could not necessarily generalize. So we really thought to ourselves, how can we actually build a platform that a bulge bracket investment bank or private equity shop can adopt full stack from top to bottom? And these need to have flexible building blocks that we can pull together to really create deeper end-to-end agentic solutions. And these building blocks, I usually like to think about 3 verbs in building anything agentic. That's retrieve, analyze, and create. I think most of what we do as product managers, as CEOs, as investment banking analysts, private equity investors, all fall into that category. And we can dive a lot deeper into that. But, everything starts with the first retrieval step, right? I need to make sure that we have really high quality data in order to do anything downstream from that, including creating spreadsheets, DCF models, investment memos, board decks. So As we like to say internally, the model is only as good as its context. And Anthropic, we created the model context protocol as the underlying foundational layer to build integrations exactly for that reason. So we again looked on the market for the highest quality data providers for financial data sets that analysts really care about. And I think that's when there was a very serendipitous marriage of what Daloopa was looking at as well. And as we sort of built upon our partnership, we realized that Daloopa's data is just the highest quality in the space and really easily accessible in a way that's very easily verifiable by the analysts as well. We think about trust on a daily basis. Even if Claude can build the perfect DCF model, if nobody has the ability to audit and verify Claude's responses, the solution is useless. The fact that Daloopa really provides the highest quality, fully verifiable data sources is what got us really excited about this partnership. And it's obviously proved really fruitful since we started.
You alluded to something, so maybe let's jump into it. The concept of building models. So, we both have a finance background. And when I think about my history of building models, the part about building models that ironically is easy is actually the mechanical part, the Excel part. Like once you learn your hotkeys, once you get used to it, the mechanical part is the part that you can automate away. And I think it's very easy to look into finance and say, oh, people build a lot of models. If I can build a DCF or an LBO or a comp sheet or whatever, like I've figured out finance. But, running Daloopa, we know that that's not the case. Like the mechanical part of building a DCF, while it's important, is not the core of what finance is about. The core of a model is really this evaluation of a business. You're trying to simulate the business. You're trying to drive your model through its operating outputs, adjust your EBITDA in a way that reflects the true nature of what the business is doing, as opposed to like, oh, I have a model, let's forecast it out 5 years, put a terminal value, discount it back, and poof, I have a stock price. Like that, yes, that's part of the job, but that's such a small piece of the job. So when you guys think about helping people build a model, right, over time, I think it's fair to assume that AI will be building models. How do you think about balancing these two parts, the mechanical Excel part and the thought process, like get the simulation of the business right part?
Yeah, for sure. We ultimately think about human AI interaction paradigms, right? We really want Claude to be a companion and a thought partner. I'm using Claude every single day to really test my hypotheses about what products to build, let me know about new things on the market and new trends I should be watching out for. Technically, that jargon that my engineering team, is throwing at me that I don't understand. Like, it's really important for me to think about how Claude can augment my intelligence while allowing me to free up my time to focus on the part that really matters, which is actually doing the thinking, right? I probably surmise to guess that an analyst spends 50 to 60% of their time just on the mechanical aspect of actually preparing that discounted cash flow model or LBO model, or retrieving data from S&P, updating it on a quarterly basis for the latest actuals, doing comparisons of actuals versus budget, right? I think all of these very mechanical parts in your daily workflow, that's where we would love for Claude to start taking on immediately today, so that you can really focus on developing relationships with customers, with your targets, and really focusing on understanding the core parts of the business, right? So I think Claude as a thought partner is really the direction that we're thinking about going in. Of course, over time, as we train Claude to be even better at financial services, financial reasoning, we just launched our Sonnet 4.5 model today, where Claude is already topping the leader chart again when it comes to financial analysis and reasoning benchmarks, including Finance Agent, which is, I think, a well-recognized benchmark in this space. I think Claude will get even better at financial judgment. But ultimately, we think about Claude as, again, a thought partner to you to really allow you to test your assumptions, test your thesis, and spend a lot of your time on that creative thinking.
Yeah, one of the things I've really enjoyed working with you guys is an alignment of the mission. So At Daloopa, our mission is to have our data be everywhere when someone needs fundamental data. So it doesn't matter if you're building a model, writing a research memo, putting it into PowerPoint. Like I want to power all of that. And Claude has enabled me, at least through our partnership, has enabled me to see the light at the end of this tunnel, where over time, people will be relying on these agentic workflows to write their memos, to send their morning notes, to write summaries, to build their models, to build their decks, and so on. Like that alignment has been very, very cool to me. And where I think that really breaks the mold of how this industry has evolved is if we, rewind the clock to pre-Anthropic, pre-Daloopa days, this industry that, we were both analysts in is an industry that's dominated by these like platforms, right? They're somewhat closed ecosystems. There is some API sharing in the background, but for the most part, they're closed ecosystems. And I often think of these platforms as they're very powerful. I love using them. I'm myself a Bloomberg Power user. But when I think about the amount of value I get versus the amount of tools they provide, almost every user is a fraction of what the total scope of functions are. It doesn't matter if it's a FactSet terminal, Bloomberg terminal, or what have you. And when I think about the future that you and I have a vision for, we don't think in terms of like the platform capture, right? We think in terms of the workflows that we can automate and how we can automate those workflows, which create sort of like a fork in the road. Because if let's say you and I are right, that over time we think about, hey, I'm going to automate your earnings problem. I'm going to automate your ramping into company problem. I'm going to automate your SIM problem. If we're right about all of these things, what do you think that implies about the terminals business? And how do you think the future looks like if all of us, let's say all of us figured out how to be successful? How do you think that looks?
Yeah, for sure. My vision for Claude, and we are a research lab at heart, right? Claude is fundamentally the thing that we all work on a daily basis. And my vision for Claude is that I want it to be the backbone for the financial services industry as a whole, because it is the best model in terms of performance for all of the core workflows that you really care about. Now, I'm very agnostic to how you consume Claude. You can consume Claude directly on Claude for Financial Services. You can consume Claude because one of your data providers is using Claude in the background as an agent, because again, Claude is the best at a financial research or analysis workflow. Or you could be consuming Claude directly on a vertical solution that is building specifically for much deeper workflows. We as one company on the product side cannot possibly satisfy and solve for all of these core front-end use cases, right? So we really want to empower the ecosystem. And we're a really small company, relatively speaking, and it's going to be impossible for us to build for all of these different use cases.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I think that's where you and I are very similar in terms of how we think about the space, because everyone else looks at it so differently. Like, I don't really care how my customers use my data, right? Like they can build their own front end, they can buy another agentic front end. All I care about is my data gets consumed. It sounds like all you care about is that your intelligence, like clock, gets consumed. Like if, a big hedge fund wants to build their own front end because they want to do all these cool, fancy, customized stuff, great. If, a foreman, small up and coming private equity shop, venture capital shop wants to just buy the whole stack from either Cloud for Financial Services or from someone else, like fine. Right. So long as your intelligence, my data is powering it, I'll be successful. You guys will be successful.
100%.
That does kind of like run afoul of like the traditional way this industry has been built, which is this, like create an ecosystem. If you buy from me, you're going to buy everything. I try not to negotiate on price. If you buy my API, it's a separate feed. It's a separate fee, even though, my API and what you're seeing on the screens are really the same thing, but I'm going to double dip, triple dip as much as I can. The other thing that I have noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, is the way when we built this product, the way we've thought about success criteria and the way we think about customers using it has been a very consumer-based lens, which is we think about number of data points, consumption, usage, engagement. Like these are very consumer company type metrics. When you think about the enterprise customers, it's very much like, hey, here's the ROI. Like I sit down with a CTO and be like, hey, look, my solution costs $1.5 million, but I've provided $4 million of hypothetical ROI. So on that basis, you should continue buying my solution. In fact, you should, take my renewal at a 25% price increase. But I don't think we've ever once talked about like enterprise-wide, like $2 million ROI deal for companies. Why do you think that's the case?
So here are a few different points that we should probably talk about. One is around enterprise pricing, and I think it's actually a really interesting topic because now we're moving away from just a chatbot token-based consumption, and we're moving toward value-based understanding and a much easier way of calculating what the ROI actually looks like. I can tangibly see, hey, it takes my analysts 10 hours to create a pitch deck, but it takes an agent 1 to 2. So I think that sort of value-based pricing is going to become much more clear as these end-to-end agentic solutions actually get built. And we're having these conversations internally today as we speak, right? We're still primarily pricing based on seats and tokens, but I certainly view that changing. We're already seeing this change with outcome-based pricing, right? There's many customer support systems in the world that price based on, resolution rates and number of tickets resolved. So I think we're going to see a shift in how enterprises think about pricing overall, especially because I think these agentic solutions, they're not necessarily just human-facing products. That's why we talked about sort of consumer-facing pricing, but they can independently take on work over time, which I think is a very different paradigm. On your first point of how do we think about ecosystems within this space? Again, as a model provider, we're agnostic to how the market is going to evolve, as long as Claude is the underlying foundation model that really powers these use cases. That's why we spend most of our time working directly with enterprise customers, but also with software customers building on top of us. So we really understand what these use cases are, and we make sure that we hill climb the model capabilities to solve for those use cases.
How do you think about breaking down the problems to be solved by the front end, the UX part, versus the model part, versus like the partner part, like the part where we comes in? So let's say building like a pitch deck. How much of solving a pitch deck problem do you think is Claude on the front end, Sonnet Opus on the AI front, or the partnership MCP strategy on the context side?
Yeah, for sure. So again, I think about the 3 verbs that govern basically how we build agentic solutions for the most part. That's retrieve, analyze, and create, right? What we're building at Anthropic is a platform. We want to be building flexible building blocks that not only solve for financial services use cases, but for an enterprise that has, investment bankers in the front office and KYC reconcilers in the back office, we want to be able to solve for both, right? Ultimately, we want Anthropic to be a long-term enterprise partner. Now, for each of those components, retrieve, analyze, and create, again, retrieval is really important, right? We can't do anything downstream without having connections to the highest quality data. And that's why we've built integrations with Daloopa and many other industry leaders in this space. And we will continue to add the availability of data because in finance, data access is alpha, right? We want to really support you in not only processing the data faster, but also better, right? Yield insights that you were not able to see before. So I think this will be an evergreen part of our partnership strategy. Downstream from that, how do we think about the ability to do analysis and create outputs? This is going to be a combination of both model capabilities and what we call agentic functionalities, which are essentially a fancy word for product features that we build on top of the model. Right. The models themselves need to be fully capable of producing a discounted cash flow model. But we also need to give the model tools, right? How does Claude actually create a DCF model? We give access to a computer. That computer needs to be within the API or in the front end, right? That computer is actually what the model, as a really smart intern on the first day at your investment fund, is able to use the computer, write code, and edit, create, analyze all of the outputs. So it will be a combination of both. But, we only have so much bandwidth to solve for a finite set of problems. So we really want to, again, empower the ecosystem to solve the rest.
Yeah, when I think about a create problem, which I know you and I, we don't spend a lot of time on, not as much as like the plethora of software companies and, startups that's popping out doing that. I was at a meeting recently where one of the attendees was the CEO of one of the Mac 7 companies, and this gentleman said something that was really interesting. So he basically said, when you think about the problems that you have a person solve in front of a computer, the problems that he or she solves is not native to one application, right? On your monitor, you have all sorts of applications open. You might have your email open, you might have Excel open, you might have, some note-taking thing open, but in your head, it's all in the same context. You're trying to solve one problem. You just have multiple applications open. And his view is, if you have that person solve a problem, that person is going to be agnostic to what tools they're using so long as they get to the output. And when I think about the way a lot of agents are creating for solutions today, it's very native within one silo, right? Like this is your Excel agent. This is an agent that is specifically to help you summarize something. This is your note taking app. But there's no orchestration of all of those, at least not big major ones that we have seen. But a true agent in my mind is an analyst. It's like, hey, can you go figure this out for me? Like, I'm not going to dictate if you should use email or search the web or open 4 tabs or 8 tabs. Like, none of that matter, but you just got to get to the answer and give me your opinion.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think that is a create problem, or do you think that is an analyze problem?
So I think about the core capabilities that we humans have that are really important to getting work done as being distinct from the tools through which you do those tasks, right? Excel, for example, in my mind represents the ability to do quantitative analysis, right? That is a capability. But you're also doing it on a surface called Excel. But Excel can very much be replaced by Google Sheets or numbers, right? Email is a stand-in for being able to do external and internal communication. That can be done via Slack or email or Microsoft Teams, right? So I think having the distinction in my mind is quite important, because what we want the model to be solving for, and what we're spending a lot of time with our research teams, are the capabilities. We'll have a set of MCP servers and APIs during training, but our gut here is that it will actually very much generalize to other applications that solve for the same capabilities. If we build Claude to be really good at Excel, it's going to be pretty good at Sheets, even though the APIs themselves are actually quite different, right? Now, how do we actually deploy these models into production? That's when tools become important, right? Enterprises already have many of these tools set up within their environments because these are foundational capabilities they need for their analysts. There, how we think about deploying Claude is we want Claude to meet users where they are, right? There should be a Claude in Excel. There should be a Claude in your Gmail. We just launched the Google browser extension, which is really powerful for a number of these different use cases.
I tried it. It's sick.
Right? It's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And it's super flexible. But sometimes, having a direct API integration with Excel is going to get things done a lot faster. But ultimately, in the backend, it is the same Claude, right? With the same intelligence. And ultimately, we want to start also moving toward a world where context will maybe even be shared across these applications so that you're working with the same analysts across all of these different services.
Yeah. So let's talk product roadmap for a second. I've been asked this question a lot by my customers. Is like, fast forward 3 years. So I don't know about for you guys, probably the same, but for us, it's our customers care about what we're able to provide for them today, but they also really care about what we can do for them down the line, because they don't view it as like, oh, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to reevaluate every year. They're basically saying, I'm going to buy a product for what it can do today, but I'm going to partner with you as a business because in 3 years, I think you're going to be able to solve more problems for me. And that's really the promise that we have for our customers. I'm going to assume it's somewhat similar for you guys, just based on the rate of how things have progressed over time. What is your vision for what Claude is able to do on its own? What is your vision for the partnership ecosystem? And if any of the partners that you wish to get on board are not partners today, what would you tell them, hoping that they would come on board as, a context partner so we can do something great together?
Yeah. So as I think about how the industries are going to evolve, AI is going to be as ubiquitous as cloud, right? Every single company is going to have AI in it.
Yeah, it's not going away.
It just depends on which AI model you use. For us, we're really enterprise focused, right? We're very financial services focused. We want Claude to be, again, the backbone for the financial services industry. So in our minds, we want to be partnering with enterprises directly in adopting our API, our first-party applications. We want to make sure that our partners have the opportunity to showcase their data and showcase their tools to our platform and to our customers, right? And also have the opportunity to work with our research teams to let us know, hey, if Claude is not the best at retrieving Daloopa information today, how can we improve? We want Claude to work for you. Now, how do we think about our first party roadmap? I would say we are really excited about building virtual collaborators that can much more independently take on projects, own decisions, and effectuate concrete outcomes that we care about every single day. And I think that has two main components to it. One is, again, going back to the three verbs, retrieve, analyze, and create. We'll keep pushing on product roadmap features along each of these dimensions. Some more integrations with data sources that you all care about. The ability to do much deeper analysis, that is understanding the data that's retrieved, but doing computation on top of it in the form of SQL or Cloud Code or Excel sheets. And then the ability to create really high quality institutional outputs. That's ultimately a medium for communication, right? Both verbal and visual communication. And I think this should be done in a way that matches the expected output types, pitch decks, SIMs, PIBs, investment memos. I think that is really important because, again, we have to meet users where they are, right? It's fantastic that Claude can do all of these things, but if you have no idea what Claude can do, and Claude can't get you to that outcome that you can verify and trust quickly, that's a failure mode. So I think the other pillar that we think about for first party is how do we get users to actually understand how to use these virtual collaborators and deploying that into production.
Yeah, there's such a big blank canvas problem because we do a lot of these like customer advisory board meetings. And I think the number one question I get from customers, both the C-suite all the way to the analyst level, is like, what do I use this for? Because like chat has such a big blank canvas problem. You go in and you just see this chatbot. Like, what can I do with this? What are some of the most interesting use cases you've seen?
Yeah, for sure. Again, I think about the retrieve, analyze, and create spectrum for everything that we do, right? I think it's very obvious that AI is fantastic at analyzing data sets at scale. So a lot of the use cases historically have really centered around investment research, right? Being able to do essentially initiation coverage report on your company or a market TAM analysis within seconds. I think that's really powerful. And I think that's where the ability to connect to core data sources like Daloopa becomes really differentiating. But we're really also starting to see downstream from that, how do we think about analysis and creation aspects? So we just launched our file creation feature a few weeks ago.
I played with it.
So I think it still certainly has room for improvement, right? It's really just the starting point for us. But Claude, what we get really excited about is that coding is a really flexible skill, right? You all know that Claude is state of the art when it comes to code, even more so with our Sonnet 4.5 launch today. Code is a really powerful way for Claude to understand how to edit, create, generate documents, and it's what's really powering our PowerPoint and Excel generation as well. So we're certainly seeing really fantastic use cases around that. I think we're also seeing novel ways of how the platform could be adopted. So Artifacts, for example, is a way for Claude to essentially create mini apps using code at runtime. That means that Claude can create any mini app on the fly. We've seen some of our financial services investor customers use Artifacts as a live way to model out what comps look like with a live regression of revenue versus growth rate. So I think that's all really exciting. We're really excited about how we can not only meet users where they are, but we can also engender net new use cases.
I'll tell you a crazy use case I saw just this week, I guess today. So one of my customers was looking at guidance versus actuals because, public companies guide and guidance is really messy. Like it's just all over the place. Whereas actuals from like a revenue or KPI perspective tends to be more structured. And the question they wanted to figure out is, can I look at every company in the space and rank them based on their ability to hit guidance? It's like, it seems like a really simple question. We're like, yeah, you cover the space, there's 40 companies in there. That's something you should know. But like, how do you know? It's so crazy to figure it out. And on a screen share, like they did it. And I was like, wow, yeah, I guess it works. Right. Because they ran their live regression. They could show, hey, this company has this amount of standard deviations for beating their own guidance. That company does not. There's just a lot of volatility. And this company just never beats their guidance, like, period. And that was really powerful. The other thing I saw that really changed how an analyst works is I was talking to this buy side analyst who basically is looking at private equity takeout risk, right? We just saw in the news the single largest LBO ever for EA was just announced. And so there is this general fear in the market right now that as interest rates come down, private equity takeout risk is higher, and you never want to be short a stock that has huge PE takeout risk.
Mm-hmm.
But then it begs the question, how do you know? And the right way to figure it out is to, for all the companies that you look at, to build an LBO, throw in the reasonable assumptions, and look at like, don't short any stock that can take on a decent amount of leverage and generate a 20% IRR for a potential buyer. Like, just not a good idea, too much risk. But it's easy to say that, it's hard to prove that, because then you have to go build the LBO. And if you cover 50, nobody's building 50 LBOs. It just takes too long. And so what we saw a customer do is it says, I don't actually need you to build the whole LBO in Excel because I don't really care. But what I want you to do is just build the LBO in your head, in Claude's head, and just generate for me the one-pager output and just give me the sensitivity analysis for when, SOFR spreads change to entry multiple changes, like what is the potential IRR for a buyer. And based on that, you can sort rank your entire universe from most likely to least likely to get taken out. And I saw that and I was like, that's insane, because the analyst in me is like, if I had this tool, I would have so much more conviction on the short side of my book than I used to, because it was so much like hand wavy. I think this company will be safe. I don't think that company will be safe.
Yeah.
What I've noticed is that the blank canvas problem is pretty huge. But I've also been shocked at how quickly people are able to come out with ways to just surprise me at every turn on how to use the tools that, frankly, was not designed for that. But people figured it out, and now it's like a constant use case at this one customer shop.
That's the amazing part of what I get to do every single day, is because I can design for these use cases because I spend a lot of time understanding how workflows currently work, right? But as you put these really flexible solutions into the hands of our customers, everyone really discovers surprising use cases, right? Because ultimately, our customers are much more intimately familiar with their problems, right, than even we are, because even despite how much time we spend with our customers, right?
Right, yeah.
So I think what we think about is, how do we drive repeatability in that use case and discovery within an organization, right? If you've really found a novel use case, we want you to be able to very easily save that down so you can rerun it again. And ultimately, the model sort of architecture is really simple, right? It's just the model with a set of tools and prompts. I think we're really moving toward the world where we can make those prompts much more repeatable if you've really found success with it, and give you the ability to share that within your organization. The mental model that we sort of have internally of who we build for, we think about builders and collaborators. Builders are the ones in our minds that are much more willing to experiment with AI solutions today, disrupt their existing workflows to really understand how these solutions can massively transform them. I think we want to give builders the tools to do this, right? How do we maximize their success? It is building for the workflows that they understand today already, right? But once they discover novel use cases, we want to be able to allow them to share all of those use cases internally. So I think we're not quite there when it comes to, I think, allowing for more viral discovery within organizations, but that's kind of how we think about driving more growth in the future.
Anthropic recently raised $10 billion, the least hidden secret in all fundraising history. With so much capital, why finance? Like, of all the spaces, of all the problems that you can solve, why choose finance as the first verticalized problem to solve for?
So I think two main reasons. One, finance is about 10% of GDP, right? So for us, we want to be building toward the world's most economically valuable set of workflows and tasks, right? And finance is very much leading the pack when it comes to just the degree of importance, right, within the economy. And finance, the second reason is that it gives us the ability to map out a playbook that we can really scale across other verticals. That playbook has two main components to it. One is, how do we really push model intelligence forward with finance? I get really excited about finance, not because I've spent, many 3Ms fixing LBO models, but finance analysts are some of the most demanding and most diligent users when it comes to core use cases like data analysis at scale, creating really complex Excel models, being able to build, board level PowerPoints. These are really important skills that if we were able to nail them with our research team, that would really massively boost horizontal intelligence forward.
Just to play devil's advocate for the sake of it, if I look at the public benchmarks across the vertical use cases, right, finance almost always ranks as the lowest scoring benchmark for all the large language models across all the vertical use cases. Like legal, math, is all in the 90s, and finance like rarely does any model break 50. I know Opus and Sonnet 4.5 probably will break 50, but couldn't I make the argument like there are problems that you're so good at solving today, you could build a vertical use case around that. Why pick the one where of all the benchmarks, this is the lowest scoring benchmark problem?
That's precisely why we do want to spend time on it, right? We want to bridge the gap between where the model is today and where it is in the future. When it comes to benchmarks, I think it's really interesting to think about what is an academic benchmark and what is actually deployed into production. When it comes to enterprise use cases, there's actually very few benchmarks that give us a true idea of how things are done in the field.
It's true.
Right. I think Finance Agent is a really good one because it essentially mimics what a first-year analyst should know in their daily task when it comes to financial analysis.
Getting a high score in the CFA test tells me nothing about your ability to be a finance agent.
Exactly. And all of that is in the academic textbooks already. That's very easy to train on.
Yep.
Right. I think that's why we see low scores on Finance Agent, because it is, for the first time, starting to mimic what these economically viable tasks actually entail. Right. That's where we want to spend a lot more time building internally and with our customers. Many more evals and benchmarks that actually represent real world use cases, starting with finance as, I think, a perfect example because the skill sets we build for finance are really generalizable across the board.
Yeah. Interestingly, the number one thing that has been requested by my customers is actually not a product capability, it's a benchmark. My customers have asked me to give them, because there is such a lack of benchmarks on like true economic use case in finance, that we've been asked by multiple customers. We've actually open sourced it and released it recently on just benchmarking like every model. We're agnostic, we're fair, we open up the entire code base and basically just benchmark everything, and we're going to do it going forward just so the entire industry just understands where everybody sits, not on hypothetical questions where may or may not actually happen in finance, but like true finance use cases, because there's been multiple attempts at these benchmarks. And when you dig into the questions, the prompts, the benchmark prompts, you're just like, that's not a real question that anybody will really ask for. I understand why you're doing that because it's easy to verify on the back end, but you should never design a benchmark because it's easy for you to verify on the back end. You should design a benchmark that mimics what the users actually care about, like a real question the user will put into it. So what we did was we reached out to a bunch of customers. We got a list of their ideal benchmarking prompts, like what they care about, either something they've been using internally to benchmark or just stuff that they work on. We consolidated, like 500 of them, and we basically say these are the 500 benchmarks. We hope that they don't autocorrelate too much, but with enough variety in there, that's our benchmark. We just released our first one. I haven't spent enough time going through it yet, so I couldn't memorize the results. But yeah,
Yeah.
most requested for capability, a benchmark.
You know, the reason why that is because these models are so flexible, right? How do you really gauge what good looks like? And I think I want to demystify the accessibility of things like benchmarks and evals, right? They sound really sophisticated, but an eval is simply a task. Say, build me a DCF model on Apple. And then a set of expected good responses of what you expect the result to be, right? The DCF model should probably have revenue projections tied to some reasonable growth rates, right? It should have future cash flows discounted back to the present,
Yep.
right? I would really encourage customers and users to think about what are the tasks you're trying to solve for internally and have some baseline understanding of how you gauge what good looks like. That's what an eval is, right? I think it's really difficult for you to rely on something that we publish, on model launch day to say, hey, this thing is the perfect model at finance. Even finance as a term, that's a fictitious industry, right?
That's right.
What you do every single day is so different between a hedge fund and a private equity shop. So I'd really encourage our customers to start pulling together a set of use cases, and it can be a small pool of use cases that's well representative of what you really care about. And we're very happy to spend time with our customers to build that with them.
Yeah. What would you like to share with any of your potential customers? What do you think is most top of mind, or what is most top of mind for you right now?
Yeah, for sure. Ultimately, Anthropic is a research lab. So I think about two things when it comes to where we are in the cycle. One is that a mantra we have internally is that the model is the model you're interacting with today is the worst version they will ever be. Right? I think what that really means is that there's plenty of opportunity for us to really understand what enterprise use cases are in the real world and focused on what we believe to be the most important way of solving them, which is a research to customer flywheel, right? We have to let you all adopt these solutions and reduce the barrier to adoption so that you can let us know what things are working well, where things are breaking, and then we provide that feedback back to our research teams, and we help you set the right system prompts, to fix them in the short run. So I think I'm very bullish that we're just at the beginning of this journey for enterprises, and there's a lot of work that we can do. I think folks talk about, model intelligence saturating very often, but I think very few companies, especially from a foundation lab perspective, has truly spent time investigating these deep domain-specific use cases, and that's where we really want to spend a lot more time with you all.
I agree. I've worked with you for 6 months now. I don't think I've heard you say AGI once, but we've talked about customer problems till ad nauseum. So I agree. I think that's the way to take it. At the end of the day, you build a business around people's problems, not around, hypotheticals. Right? Maybe hypotheticals work at some point, but to solve problems today is a definite and well proven way to build a successful company.
100%.
One last question. We fast forward 3 years, right? Cloud for Finance, financial services has been wildly successful. What is the product roadmap from here to 3 years out from now that got us there? Why was it so successful?
Yeah, for sure. I think about the capabilities we're building and how we get those capabilities into the hands of our customers. In terms of the capabilities we're building, I think the number one thing starts with understanding what problems our customers are trying to solve, right? Financial services is a massive industry. I think where we started back in July is one small slice of it, right? Focused on investment analysis workflow.
Mhm.
Where I want to spend a lot more time is going much deeper with hedge fund customers, with private equity, with insurance, with investment banking to really understand what are the core pain points, even more so than the research that we've done today. For us to really improve on those capabilities, it's really important for us to think about the research to go to market flywheel. We have to deploy these solutions into the hands of our customers to understand where we build. For us to do that, we need to make sure that these workflows already work for the use cases we care about. That brings us to, again, the three verbs I think about when it comes to building agentic solutions. Retrieve, we will continue to massively increase the amount of data that Claude is able to access and ingest. We've done a good job with fundamentals back in July, but there's a lot more proprietary information that would help you connect to real-time credit and equity information. None of that is available today. So I think there's plenty of room for partnership. And then when it comes to analysis and creation, we want to own really the core work surfaces that you are working on every single day. We want Claude to be an Excel companion right alongside you. And we want Claude to be able to help create institutional quality outputs when it comes to Word and PowerPoint. And when it comes to how we want to deploy and adapt these solutions, we need to make sure that things are really easy to use, right? To your point, the blank canvas problem is massive. There needs to be ways for Claude to proactively suggest what it's good at. Today, I actually ask Claude every single morning, what do you think you can help me with?
It's a good question.
It does a pretty good job because it's connected to the core data sources you care about.
Yep.
But how can we proactively surface that to the user so they know exactly where can Claude fit into their daily workflow? So I think really reducing that barrier to adoption while increasing the depth of which Claude can help you accomplish your workflows, that's where we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah. So blank canvas problem actually works both ways, right? Our customers don't know how to use AI to solve their problems. But from my perspective, when I'm thinking about my product roadmap, what I want to solve for today, my product roadmap is I want to be in every Excel model, every investment memo, every PowerPoint. I want my data to power all of those. I want an agentic solution to power those. But there are workflows that I don't know, right? I know Excel, I know PowerPoint, I know Word, I know memos, I know emails, but I don't know trading systems. I don't know matching. I don't know commodities. I don't know, how to think about the difference in pricing structures between level 2, level 3 data. Like finance gets so much deeper once you move away from the what to invest in to the entire trading systems, right? And sometimes I think about this when I look at a bank and they have, whatever 50 stories in the building, 3 of those are investment banking, 2 of that is trading floor. What is everything else, right? There's so much to be solved for in everything else. That's where the mid and back office sits. That's where you can solve problems ranging from the trading operations to, how things are settled to compliance to legal. Like that problem set lives in finance. And frankly, it's still opaque to me. And the best way in my mind that we can keep building on what we can do is to have a strong understanding of each of these problems and then figure out what needs to happen, be it standalone, be it with partners, to go solve that. Because ultimately, you build a business by solving problems. And the more problems we solve, the more business we build.
And I think the way you approach solving these problems are also fundamentally different as well, right? I think about selling intelligence and selling outcomes at Anthropic. A lot of what we talked about today is really around selling intelligence, right? Superpowering the front office, being able to do really raw data analysis with a lot of intellectual horsepower. I think there's a lot of back office, middle office process transformation type tasks where I think the limiting factor is less on intelligence, but much more on compute and go to market product and engineering capacity to actually build for those use cases, right? That's where I think partnering really closely, not only with ourselves, but also with our massive partners on the integration and systems integrator side. I think those are really important avenue for us to solve these problems together with our enterprise customers. So again, I think we really think about an ecosystem approach here, not only when it comes to data integrations and product integrations, but also deployment and change management with our SI partners.
Yeah, I love how like what feels like the first time ever, we have a player that is so open about the ecosystem versus like this space has just been full of like silos of information. There's everything is protected behind walls. There's everything is entitled four different ways. Everyone approaches this from a platform approach and from a bundling approach. I charge you more because I'm offering you four more tools. I don't care if you use them, but I'm offering four more tools, so you got to pay me more. And now we are saying, you know what? The right solution for everybody is if I solve your problem, I've earned my business. But if I have not solved your problem, I'm not going to charge you for it. This is an open ecosystem. Everybody gets to participate. Everybody is a partner because at the end of the day, we're just here trying to solve problems.
100%.
I love the framework. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Thomas.
For more information, go to www.daloopa.com. That's DALOOPA.com.